Hello, everyone. First time user. So my name is Tyler Doobie, and I am your new president for this year. So welcome. Thanks for coming. I'm sorry I missed you last month. I dodged it for 3.5 years, but last month's luncheon, my first experience with COVID. So I didn't get to do the swearing in, or maybe y'all were swearing at us. I don't know. I was on the couch when we were here this last month, but we've got an exciting presentation today. There's going to be a couple of volunteer gigs that you're going to hear about. So we're actually looking for some warm bodies to fill some seats at those events. We've got 2 coming up in November. So pay attention to sign-in details. If we don't have a way for you to register here today, there will be some announcements coming out via email in the next couple of weeks. Next thing I want to bring awareness to, we've got a brand new newsletter out. It's kind of gotten a refresh, and Griselda did a really good job at putting that together. She's back there in the back, so if you see her, tell her she's done a good job. If you haven't seen it, go read it. We've got a lot of announcements about what cool stuff we're going to be doing this year, and then you can tell her she's done a great job with that. Couple of just things to look out for this year. We're going to be rolling out a new communications platform. So all that constant contact email spam that you get from us, we're trying to learn how to do that better to get the word out about our events and handle registrations and payment processing all kind of in a single platform. So there might be some kinks for us to work out, bear with us, but we're doing it for the greater good. So look out for that over these next few months. And something you may not be aware of that's being sort of handled at what we call the society level, the national or global level of ASCE. If you've seen the Dream Big movie that came out several years ago out in the IMAX theaters, there is a new version of that called the New World Vision. I think it actually premieres this week or last week in Chicago, and then it's released to the general public sometime early next year. So we're going to be looking to do an event here in Austin at the Bob Bullock when it comes out to kind of show support for our profession and go see the new film that ASCE has invested in. Cool stuff coming near term and next year. And I did something the other day that I'm surprised that I remembered to do. I paid my ASCE dues. So just throwing it out there. I don't know if you all get those nasty grants from the society, like, hey, you're past due. It does mean something to actually pay your dues every year. It helps us fund all of these volunteer events. It helps us fund our infrastructure report card, which helps us all stay employed. So I hope that you also remember to do that whenever ASCE reminds you, because it really is important to keep the wheels moving on this thing. So I'm going to turn it over to a couple of other folks that have some announcements, and then we'll get started with our presentation. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Johnston. I'm the outreach chair, and our first community event this year will be November 18th out at Community First Village. They have a farm out there that they need help, volunteers come out and clean, weed, do some farm work. So if you want to get that thumb a little greener, come join us. Let's go ahead and scan that code, and it'll get you an email pop-up, send it directly to me, and I'll help work you through the registration. We'd like to get at least 10 volunteers. So please look into this. There'll be emails coming out, just a few hours of your time. Weekend before Thanksgiving. It's a homeless community. A lot of this food goes to those that need it, and it's a good opportunity to start that as calendar time of giving a little early. This will be the one of two events. The next one will be coming a little bit later next year. So please scan the code, check it out, send me an email with any questions. Thank you.
Oh, look, I messed up the. So we have, last year we did the QA engineering blitz in person. This year it's coming up again, November 29th and 30th. It was a blast last year. There's like 21 classes. They're like, they call them advisory classes, which is kind of what we called homeroom back in my day. We send 2 volunteers to lead a competition, either building a tower as tall as they can out of cups, or a bridge out of paper. It takes 2 hours out of your time in the morning, and it's a blast. So look for an email registration to come out here the next week or 2. Thanks.
I'll take this slide. So just want to plug that, we're on all the social media channels, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. A lot of these presentations are recorded and then shown later on our YouTube page. So feel free to take a moment to scan those and also follow us on those. And then I'll call you back up, sir, for our sponsor, Pape-Dawson Engineers.
Oh, that's slide. Okay, cool. So I'm back. So I'm Tyler Doobie. I work at Pape-Dawson Engineers. I'm a design leader here in our Austin office. I'm just kind of curious, how many of you, like show of hands, have heard of us and kind of know what we do? Okay. I asked that question, that's most of the room, but I asked that question at our student chapter at UT probably 3 or 4 years ago. And it was like a quarter of the room, maybe a third. And every year that we go back and sponsor, it's more and more. And it's good to see that same kind of response in the professional community. Wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about what we do and where we're going. I have noticed, with our social media really ramping up, I think you see and hear us more in the community about what we're doing. We've been climbing the ENR rankings and Business Journal rankings. We're really becoming a full services engineering firm. And so we like to be active in our communities and volunteering. Here's my Pape-Dawson contingent. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Right now, this came to office 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so Brian found us. I don't know how you found us on social media, but Brian thought we were a pretty cool place to work, so he picked up his life and moved down here to Texas. What about you, Brandon?
I'm Brandon Exler. I actually want to draw under Tyler, and I'm actually
Yeah.
I have my also work here at Hollon. I came from Dallas. Very good.
Yeah. Katie?
So I'm Katie. I work with Tyler. I felt out of the last community go.
Cool. And Brent?
Maybe Brent's words. I came to also call you.
So you can tell that I've strong-armed some of these folks to be here, and the rest came on their own. But we really are a great place to work if you're looking for a job. We are a great place to partner if you need a civil engineer expert. We have been expanding our expertise. Actually, this last summer, we announced kind of a different growth strategy. Instead of hiring people one at a time, we're looking at small engineering firms in Texas and even the southern United States to really expand our reach in what we do. And I can't believe it. We've acquired 2 firms since we've made that announcement. One of them is Costello Engineers, big presence in Houston, land development, which we already had a good presence there, but now it's even better. But that afforded us to bring on landscape architecture and land planning services that we haven't traditionally done in-house. So I think you're going to be hearing more and more about us in the news, so about us expanding into new markets in Texas and beyond. So just getting the word out that that's what we're doing. We're very invested in our communities, and having folks here, present and actually participating in the engineering community. So we're glad to be a sponsor here. And I'll go ahead and turn it over for our speakers, because we have a really exciting topic today. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Tyler. Thanks everybody for coming out today. We've got a couple people visiting us. Pamela will not be with us today, but Matt Hollon and Liz Johnston will be giving us a really great presentation. As many of y'all know, a few years back, there was a big land development code change that was supposed to happen around the city, and it did not happen. So there are a lot of subsequent efforts that are happening to make changes to the code, to bring them up to what they were trying to achieve in that process, but doing it kind of more on a piece by piece basis. So I'll let them give the presentation. So y'all put your hands together for Matt and Liz.
All right, thanks guys. Great to be here. And so got not only Liz, but I may actually get Kevin Shunk drawn into the fire if we have good questions on flooding. He's our floodplain administrator too. And anyway, so Liz got dragged through the fire last year when the city council looked at bringing back all these environmental and drainage ideas that were first floated back. A bunch of you guys probably remember Code Next, crashed and burned. Then we had land development code revision that got stopped by a lawsuit. And so now we're back looking at, just like Augustine said, we're looking at sort of more targeted, smaller ordinances to get done a lot of the work that the council and community were hoping to do. And so I will walk you through this. Augustine, do you guys post this later? Is that a thing? Okay, so this has there's a link to the original. It says shutting down.
All right. Okay. Test. Are you good? Can you hear us?
Nice. Yeah. Good to see those thumbs way up. It's good.
All right.
Awesome.
All right, I think we're ready. So you can talk to this, you can do as well.
Okay.
Or whatever's easiest.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
All right. Okay. Brief technical delay, and I'm back. So once again, I'm Matt Hollon. We're down to about 35 minutes for the presentation, so I'm going to speak about 20% faster than usual to blow through everything. Actually, so I will probably skip through some of this. It's probably as usual. I get excited and I put in more material than I can. Let's see, am I going the wrong way? I am. All right. So I'm going to talk today about 3 different topics. And as Augustine mentioned, we had Code Next, we had Land Development Code revision. And so a couple of these were in there. And actually the first one, the Colorado River shoreline protections, came about as a result of some folks active in the community were really interested. They're seeing a lot going on along the Colorado. You probably noticed there's a thing called SH-130 and maybe Elon Musk's big operation and a lot going on the Colorado below Longhorn Dam. So that's been a real interesting area for a long time. And I'll show you some examples, some things that are going not so great down there, and the reasons we need to have better erosion and water quality protection along the banks. I'll talk about functional green landscaping. That was a Code Next idea that came up in 2017. And so the community has seen this one time, but it really didn't get its full due. And now we're going through a stakeholder process. And I'm hoping that actually y'all will be engaged in this as going forward as we talk about these things. And then the third one is going to be definitely a very near and dear to engineers' hearts. It has to do with stormwater management for redeveloping projects here in Austin. Okay, my favorite slide, and probably most people's least favorite looking kind of slide. I love timelines. And so I love the history of our watershed protections and regulations. And so I'm going to be talking about how we're building on some new things that we created long ago. I think there's even a really long ago. Back in 1911, anybody around in 1911 for the first maximum flood ordinance? We just dug that up a couple years ago. I love that. But seriously, in 1974, we first started getting going our creek ordinances, and we said we want natural creeks. We don't want to have kind of Terminator style riding the motorcycle through Los Angeles River kind of creeks. We want to have natural looking creeks, and so and then actually introduced some drainage standards. It introduced the 25-year detention standard, sort of, but that was the result of it. A lot of really good things got rolling in 1974 that we're building on today. 1977, we had our first drainage criteria manual. And so if you actually look at a lot of our infrastructure prior to 1977, it's undersized, or it can be. Some of it's in decent shape, but it's not always right sized and so forth. And so that was kind of the base upon which a lot of things were going. We had a floodplain ordinance in 1981. I don't know that it coincided with the big Memorial Day flood that year. I don't know that it had anything to do with it directly, but that was a big moment. So there's a lot of flood stuff we're building on. And in a little bit, I'll talk about the redevelopment ordinance we're looking at. And that's basically filling what we feel like is filling kind of a small donut hole that was left in some really good work a long time ago. The Comprehensive Watershed Ordinance in 1986 also built. It was especially focused on water quality, but I think there's some drainage aspects to that too. And so there's a lot of things going on there that I'll talk about later. And then I was involved in this watershed protection ordinance in 2013. It was a really interesting effort, and we kind of again refined a lot of things that had to do with. That's when we brought in our first erosion hazard zones, working with Morgan Byers right here in the room. When we brought that in, and so these are going to be things we built on. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide, which just kind of strips out a lot of this stuff, leaves a few of them on the early drainage stuff and the watershed protection ordinance with the erosion hazard zones. So actually, 1979 and 82, we had our very first landscape ordinances here in Austin. And in 1994, we upgraded the landscape ordinance, and it looks a lot like it does today as a result of that. Irrigation techniques, how many tree islands you have in your parking lots, all that kind of stuff came in over the course of those three ordinances. And then we had, I got to shepherd this one through back in the day in 2008. We actually, we corrected some problems with our Colorado River buffers in this exact same area that I'm going to talk about today first. So we're going to talk about Colorado River buffers. We're going to talk about functional green landscaping. Darn it, I should have put on here in 2008, we also had the commercial design standards, and there's a slide in there about that. And that changed the way we build in Austin. And instead of having big parking lots in front of buildings with the, the Target or the Walmart behind it, now you're seeing, Texas wraps and all these things up on the curbs, looking a lot different in terms of development patterns. All right, I'll talk about Colorado River first. A lot of words in here. I'm going to blow through these because I don't have that much time, and they're kind of tedious. But basically, the council says we need you to look at erosion, and we need you to look at water quality along the river below Longhorn Dam. That's where the river, since the Highland Lake system really slows the water down coming through. So it's not really a wild river downstream of Austin, but it's not a lake for the first time below right where Pleasant Valley Road is down there. So we're seeing, thank you, Liz, who did a whole bunch of the work on shepherding this through initially last year, and a lot of these slides are from her slide deck. So anyway, we have crazy erosion going along in those banks. I mean, it's kind of a normal process. You have erosion along a riverbank, but we need to make sure the development is not harmed by that, and people are aware of the risks that they're involved in. And so I'll show you more pictures of Falwell Lane there. That was a real problem. $4.5 million project there. Another $2 million to repair this Tillery project, and I'll actually show you a few more shots of it. So the river is a river, and it's moving around. It's dynamic, and that's what happens. And so this is just sand in here. And so when the river is so this kind of charts these different. I don't know if I'm getting out of the picture here for my web people, but anyway, the river's really moving around, and it's really important that people understand that dynamism, and that our regulations understand that as well and work with it. And we also, the community, it looks at this rightfully as a really incredible resource. I would say the area below the Longhorn Dam is kind of undervalued. I mean, we focus on the lakes, which are beautiful and wonderful and have tons of public participation, but there's all kinds of beauty and natural wonder and opportunities, recreation, and everything else along these areas, and for natural function. And so we have long since in the 80s, again, that slide with all the milestones, we've done a pretty good job with stream buffers, but we're still trying to figure out what's the right size for the river buffer, which is just a different animal than a smaller creek. Okay, I'm not sure if that's coming out super well, but this is a map that shows the big floodplains. So the very far left is where the Longhorn Dam is, and then the river snakes through Austin's jurisdiction, and our jurisdiction ends around here, and then it's Travis County takes over, and then Bastrop County is over here. So, and I'll take here. We can take off the floodplains briefly, and you'll see these green is the critical water quality buffer zone that protects natural resources and function. And then the yellow in there is this is kind of thin for this area, 100-foot erosion hazard zone. So that's probably on its face pretty inadequate that we would have 100-foot erosion hazard zone on a big river like this. I think just the basic calculations of bank height times 4 or 5 to 1, you're going to go about 400 feet or something like that from there. So that's what we're looking at. So I'm going to zoom in on this rectangle there. Here it is, zooming in, and this just kind of shows what's going on. This is here's the river itself. Here's the floodplains. Here's the here's the current water quality protection zone. And by the way, this actually shows you the genesis of the last buffer correction we had. This development here was able to go in before we had the buffer corrected the last time, and a bunch of houses are literally like 40 feet away from the river. So, and we've had a lot of those guys, you know, come say, hey, could you guys come take a look at this? We're a little scared here. This is a problem. And so this could not happen today. You would have to build out of that. But it unfortunately was a legacy of the past. And so what we're looking at now is potentially filling that in. And instead of having a variable 200 to 400 foot river buffer, to go ahead and just call it as a 400 foot buffer and just have it be like that. Turns out Travis County some years ago, I need to get the date on this, probably 10 years ago, they actually passed a 400 foot buffer. So if you go back past our jurisdiction, it simply turns into a 400 foot buffer. There's a lot of discussion about ETJ releasing, people going, hey, state just allowed us to release from the ETJ. Why don't we do that? Well, if you do that, you would actually create, your project would then be subject to the Travis County ordinance, which is, we think, a good protective ordinance. And so we're looking at expanding this to 400 feet. Whenever we do an ordinance like this, we look at the impacts to the affected properties and communities along the way. And you can actually see, I'm sort of subconscious of getting away from this microphone here, but there you can actually see if this works. Well, sort of. I tried it earlier. There's a lot of single family and other smaller lots along this reach that are in the red. That would be the area of change. That would be the area that would now be protected that currently is not. And so we're going to be going to stakeholder groups. We'll be talking to the East Cesar Chavez businesses along there. We'll be talking to these folks here along Paragraphs Lane. And a lot of those folks are not going to be affected. They already have development there, and therefore they could use the redevelopment exception and rebuild their property and with the same impervious cover they already have. Or maybe they're already a single family residential lot and they can just build their home. They would be subject to, I think, the erosion hazard zone protections, but the critical zone wouldn't affect them. So anyway, there's more to go, and there's more fun number crunching for me and my colleagues to do behind the scenes. But I wanted to just show you a few examples of what's going on out there. And I'm not going to show you every one of these, but I'll look at Tillery and Roy Guerrero and Falwell Lane. And I think maybe a little bit of Austin Colony. So this was Tillery Lane. This is really close to right across the river from Roy Guerrero. This used to be, you see this sections of pipe. This is a 66-inch pipe. This is not a trivial, it's not a 24-inch or 18-inch pipe. That is a giant pipe. So you have a giant project, which then had to correct this. I think this is during construction, right, Morgan? So that's not even the final look. So this is the final look. So it's this big high bank. It just collapsed and just kind of melted away because they had all this source of water running off, I think, just a parking lot. Was that right? Or was it from the street? So a pretty small source of water created that whole mess. So we just didn't understand what that looked like when that was going on. I think the parking lot might have redirected the water. Yeah.
It comes further up.
Okay. More up Tillery. Yeah. Okay. So, so in Roy Guerrero, we've got, this is the pre-photo, and then the post-photo this is the same, literally same view. HDR and some of our staff put these slides together sometime back. But anyway, that's unbelievable. And this is, I mean, from the same vantage point, so it's just cut down that far. This is just going through sand and gravel, pretty painful. And so here it is again. If I can do it right. There's the same view of that beautiful bridge, pedestrian bridge, is wiped out. So we're losing a lot of good stuff here, investments. And so now this has been a little while back, but we're coming in and trying to repair this, but it's many tens of millions of dollars to repair once the damage is done in this case. Look at that. That's very large scale. So we want to avoid this kind of thing with our with the way we develop. And this is just one more. This is Falwell Lane during the 2013 Halloween flood. Onion Creek, which is bending along here, just overflowed straight to the river, wiped out a big section of the road. Here it is. So again, this is just right above sand. It's really erosive. So we need to figure out a better way to build. So all these guys worked around the clock, got it rebuilt, and then Here it is, they fixed it, and then in 2015, 2 years later, it washed out again. So now we've got that, what was it? I forgot how many millions of dollars, it was $4 million or something. We're putting in like 60-foot piles or something like that to fix this. It's a non-trivial exercise in this huge river system that is built in, that is made of sand. Look at that scale. And the TxDOT's having to fight this. This is SH-130 right next to Falwell Lane. I think we're predicting they're gonna have some serious issues over time, the way they've got their drainage set up, but hey, that's, you know, we'll talk to them if they want to help, some advice. All right, so then, and there's one other, this is the Colony Park, subdivision that's just downstream of, SH-130. And you can actually see these big erosive areas, cutting in. Look at this. This is just, well, there's a whole section of the subdivision that instead of going to a stormwater pond like this one, these guys drain to the stormwater pond. These folks up here drain straight to just an outfall right there. Sorry, too many clicks. Come on. Doop-a-doo. Too clever by half. There it is. So here's the water creating this canyon. I mean, so that it's really hard to get the scale. So I'm gonna go on a pretty near-term field trip with my erosion buddies out there. It's hard to imagine the picture doesn't justify how alarming this is. Here's the other one. That's a smaller one. But anyway, so we need people to slow the water down and create more. So this is slide. I will not read all through this, but basically this is our game plan, and we'll have it on the website if people want to check it out and see what we're doing. But basically, we are looking at erosion hazard areas. And we're studying kind of like where the action is, how far back would we want to have sort of a provisional erosion hazard zone, kind of verification area, I guess you might call it. And then later on, we probably are going to hire a consultant to map out that downstream to do a more official job. But we need an interim product, a little bit like Atlas 14, where we said, you know what, we're going to use the 500-year floodplain, the old one, as a standby, and then we'll get it done in the next few years. So that's what's going on. And we are looking at expanding the critical water quality zone. And there might be some options. We're looking at some options on how to reduce the impacts for those smaller, tinier properties. And so we were going to go out stakeholders, including y'all. This is an actual stakeholder meeting. And then we're also going to be looking at all sorts of impacts on other things. All right, so I took way too much time on that one, so I'm going to have to go faster and faster as I go through. Functional green is a landscape ordinance. And it basically, I'm just gonna blow through and talk about, so we used to not have any landscape ordinance at all. And so you didn't have to, you could just build a parking lot or whatever. And so we did, and folks did, they built parking lots, and things got really hot as a result, and uncomfortable and maybe unhealthy even. And so we had our first, and I talked about this earlier, we had our first landscape ordinances in 1979. And so you can see this is a result. This is Brody Oaks Mall, which is about to get completely redone. But, you know, there's a few tree islands here and there. It's not great, but it's way better than the first shot. And then here's South Park Meadows with the more modern ordinance. They actually were, I think they were a pod. So this is a little technically not exactly the ordinance, but it's similar. And so you can see a lot more trees in there, zoom in a little bit. And so you've got more shade, more trees, a little more healthy environment, and a more natural function. But again, this is a project that has a huge parking lot. Well, now we're bringing our buildings up to the curb, with subchapter E / commercial design standards. And so you don't have a lot of room there for natural systems. And so here we go. We have, yes, a row of trees in the front, but then you've got these big buildings and so forth, a lot of kind of embodied energy or heat radiating them off and so forth. So we do have some great examples. Admittedly, this is a public sector project. This is City Hall, which did a fantastic job. This whole thing is actually a green roof. There's a parking, three-story parking lot underneath it. So every tree, every green thing you see on this site is a result of real intentional landscaping. But they were able to kind of claw back some natural function from what otherwise would have been just very hot, difficult environment. So we're going to try to go from today's version using some systems that we've studied across the world And in the United States, in Seattle and Washington DC, we have these two examples that we're coming up with a system that's pretty similar to them, although kind of made more specific to our area ecologically. So we had these wonderful folks do a bunch of research on this, look at those other systems. Again, I'm blowing through this. We're trying to get ecological benefits. We're trying to make sure that this is economically feasible and makes sense for the projects. So all those things were taken into account when they first came up with the system. It's going to only apply if your project is above 80% impervious cover. If it has the right to have more than 80% impervious cover, you can't go, oh, I'm going to do 79% impervious cover, even though I can do 85. You got to do. You'll still have to do it. But if you're at 80 or below, this won't apply to your project. But anything above 80, and it'll apply downtown. Right now, downtown is exempt from the landscape ordinance. It's going to apply downtown as well. So that's a big change. Right now, downtown does have some landscaping, but it's generally in the public right of way using the Great Streets program. All right, so there's a ton of these are fun, but there's a million clicks, so sorry. So there's 12 different things we're giving points to. So it's a point-based thing, it's a menu-based driven thing. You get to, so you got different kinds of trees, whether you're going to protect an existing one or plant a new small, medium, or large tree, you get more points for those. You can use vegetative walls vertically, you can use green roofs horizontally. You can use green stormwater infrastructure like that you're already required to do, like rain gardens or rain tanks or porous pavement. And then something we really like is this thing called suspended pavement. If you're not familiar with it, basically, instead of just like one kind of tiny tree well that has a little bit of soil for a big old tree, or what you want to be a big old tree that doesn't grow big because it's too constrained, you can actually have a kind of a chambered system underneath your sidewalk, so that you have the tree well plus a lot of extra soil in there, and the tree can be much more healthy and survive these brutal summers we're getting now, and provide the shade that folks need in the area for beauty and health and all the other good reasons. So you have this big system that gives different points to different things. We're talking to our stakeholders actively right now. There's going to be a meeting on November 3rd where we are meeting. It's arranged by ASLA, American Institute of American Society of Landscape Architects, AIA, American Institute of Architects, Downtown Austin Alliance, RECA, and somebody else, Urban Land Institute are all involved in this. So we're talking to them. We want to talk to everybody. We want to talk to you. If you guys want to talk more about this, I'm happy to come back or do something else. This is just kind of a preview. But again, this is more landscaping and less engineering, but there's lots of engineering tie-ins. As you as an engineer or as an architect here are going to be tying in and trying to figure out, like, how do we integrate these things into our projects? You can stack things, get more points. So we did some testing. The folks that the consultants we worked with did a bunch of good testing. And so they found, here's a project that looks pretty nice on the side. There's a Texas wrap on Burnett Road. But then when you actually look at it from the top, there's just, you can see that it's the equivalent of a giant parking lot, although it has a more reflective white roof. That's good, but it doesn't have the same level of natural function that we're hoping to see. So that's where this landscape ordinance comes in. Is it going to be just covered with a giant green roof? No. Actually, if you probably will be able to comply without having very many additional green roofs or walls, but that's an option. So we get that question a lot. South Congress Hotel is a site that we kind of tout as something that's just done a tremendous job with incredible plantings, inside and outside their building. This is in their courtyard. So they passed the test. They would meet for functional green without even trying to do anything extra. They've already done it, even though they weren't asked to do it because it didn't exist when they built. So we're going to conduct more workshops to keep testing this, get more feedback from our stakeholders, including y'all. And then we will go through the boards, commissions, and council process. All of these things are going through stakeholder processes approximately now through January. And then we'll go to code with these three things, kind of staggering them. They're all different, but we will go through between January and probably, I don't think we'll get to council before at least February. But hopefully we'll wrap everything up by May. Okay, whoops, that's the same stuff I just said. Okay, and then the last topic, how am I doing on time? Yeah. Good. Okay. So this one is really interesting. Actually, I know Jose Guerrero is online watching this. This is one of his brainchilds here. It's called we're calling it stormwater management for redevelopment. It's had a lot of names, a lot of nicknames. One of them was greenfield detention. I hate that nickname. I'm going to say it. I'm not going to propagate it by saying it. These projects are not, or that would come through and be subject to this ordinance are not necessarily going to do detention, but it kind of helps you understand it a little bit. So the poster child for this. So back when I was showing the timeline, it said it talked about those early ordinances about not increasing. So the 1974 Creeks ordinance that said can't increase the 25-year peaks. And then later on, we had other versions for the 100-year and so forth. So when you come through with your brand new project, you take all the trees and the vegetation off and you put in your project, you can't have the peak, you build a detention pond. So your peak kind of gets flattened out and it stays in bounds. And so that's awesome. And everybody knows you have to do that for a greenfield project. But if you build on a gray field, what we call a gray field project, you already have something like Highland Mall here. Highland Mall, there's Highland Mall right there. So Highland Mall built in the late 60s. And of course, nobody thought at all about this stuff at that point. And so they just built a giant bunch of concrete and pavement and building rooftops. And here comes the water. And so it starts flooding the downstream neighborhood more than it otherwise would have. I'm pretty familiar with this area. And so interestingly, and back in 1986 with the comprehensive watershed ordinance, it says, you know what, if you redevelop, even if you already have pavement there, you're going to put in a water quality control. You're going to build your sand filter nowadays, green stormwater infrastructure, you got to put in a pond. So for whatever that is, going on 40 years, you've had to put in water quality ponds when you redevelop. But for all that time, we didn't retrofit in flood detention or flood conveyance or look at that. You just looked at the delta. So this ordinance is looking at that. This is a big deal. And I know there's been lots of different reactions to this, but I think it's something we need to look at as we move forward in a difficult environment in terms of like drainage and flooding and climate change. So again, as Jose would say in his discussions about the regional stormwater management program that we already have, you don't automatically put in detention. Sometimes you do other things. There's a lot of different options. And so these projects that would be subject to this could do a whole bunch of different things you don't necessarily have on site solutions, although that might be the best solution. We did model this scenario during I think it was during Code Next. It might have been Land Development Code Revision. Those are really blurred together in my mind. But we looked at this as the Del Curto subdivision or area of town off of South Lamar. And so when you assume that all of the site plan eligible properties have to go with greenfields levels, you get a little change. It's not big. It's not great. It's not a bold improvement, at least at this scale. And so I think that's one of the things we're looking at with this. I don't think it's very unlikely that we're going to go through and say every single site plan has got to do this new thing. We're probably going to say we're going to look for a threshold at which now you're big enough, your project's big enough that it's going to make a more of a dent in the problem. And therefore we're going to pick, I don't know, 5 acres, 10 acres, 3 acres. We don't know yet, but we're going to be talking to stakeholders, and we'll be doing a lot more GIS crunching and so forth and show you guys the results of that. So I think it'll be an 80-20 rule where we go, you know what? 80% of the land is in 20% of these sites. They're bigger. They can absorb the putting in a new detention pond or putting in the new drainage infrastructure that would be required by that. And then all of these very, very many tiny projects would be let off the hook because they're probably not collectively contributing meaningfully, and the administration of this would not be worth that effort. So this is kind of nerdy. I loved it though. This is the 2-year flood. And so the 2 years you could predict is more affected by, and it's kind of hard to tell what's going on with this. I don't have enough time to describe it, but basically the smaller the flood, the more impervious cover is driving this kind of stuff. This is super tedious now. This is, sorry, this is the resolution where they're saying do stuff here. And so they come in and just say, look, we want you to reduce, I'm sorry, this is not tedious, this is crucial, just as council's will. They basically said, sorry. They basically said, we want you to do these things. We want you to get these environmental drainage benefits, but we also don't want you to overly impact development capacity and housing affordability and so forth. And so, you know, we need you to do some kind of mitigation or that's not the right word for it. Sorry, I'm going too fast here for my brain. But anyway, basically they want to know, they want us to be bound to bring in a balanced proposal on this. There's as unless you haven't been in Austin very long, you know that housing is a big priority here and a major policy consideration. So we're really looking at that too. All right. Too much detail to talk about everything, but basically we're performing an analysis, looking at the size distribution of these parcels, trying to come up with the right position for this in our view for the staff recommendation, and then we'll take it on in to council here. This is the least developed of these three, but it's probably has the most impact probably on projects, and people are going to want to know how this works out. So we need a little more time with it, and so our stakeholder interactions are going to go a bit longer on this. And there we are. And so we have a little bit of time for questions, and I'm going to totally see if Liz and Kevin can help out if we get stumped. So that's it.
Any questions?
The critical water tourism was choosing the part of the need list, so the opportunities for critical water tourism buffering and placing biofiltration water quality ponds.
Yeah, I think we'd keep that. That's a great question. So yeah, we do that now. In the old days, it was like, if it's a green stormwater infrastructure control, you can do that in the upper half of the buffer. Okay, well, almost everything's GSI now. So yes, that would be, so that first 200 feet, you can put that in there. And Liz, yes, or please correct me.
The picture that you showed was the house was about to fall, and while there was a pond. Yes, and but you have to make sure that.
Sorry about that. That's a good question. There won't be buffer averaging since that's just maxed out. So that's another question. But you know, in our variable buffers, you were able to well, actually, no, that's not true. But that's not the way it works. In the East, you can have buffer averaging right on a 300-foot buffer or what have you. I don't know. I mean, yeah. Well, I was thinking about like where you have a 300-foot max, you know, consistent, and you can kind of bend it in and out, you know, to save trees or do whatever. I guess anyway, we could look at that. Sorry that nobody even asked that question, but I'm just talking. Sorry.
So I know when this was, because it was originally like a phase one of these proposals, right?
Correct.
This was related to phase two. I know when phase two was being talked about, there were also changes related to this middle housing and maybe changing the impervious cover to 55% residential areas.
Correct.
Is that still on the way, or is that a part of a different proposal?
So I would say that is probably going. That's a great question. So that's probably going to get redirected into because council is, you know, in July came up with a new resolution that said, look at allowing 3 or more units in residential districts, meaning residential single family lots, and to consider increasing impervious cover. So that is a whole nother big, and that's going to get like 100 or 1,000 times more attention than the 3 things that we're talking about here. So that's a great question. And yes, those are so my understanding is, as of recently, we just learned that council is going and staff are going to propose looking at the 3 units and no impervious cover increase and a whole bunch of adjustments to 2-family, 3-family kind of rules first. And that's going to come through and here this month through December, and they'll, I guess, vote on it, right, Liz? Maybe in December. And then in April or May, the impervious cover thing and the possible 2,500 square foot minimum lot size, that would come in then. So that's sort of staggered, but that's a huge thing. and definitely has some watershed impacts.
The redevelopment side of things, attention is requires if you changing from 80% existing impervious cover to 80% impervious cover, attention is going to be required. So what, I mean, obviously we're changing the impervious cover is 0. Are we throttling it back to a 0 condition, or what's the?
That's the proposal. The proposal is go to green fields, meaning 0%. So if you're, so I mean, here, you know, one of the things we talked about is you could have two sites side by side. Actually, one of the, we really, Kevin was watching me try to put in one more slide, and that was, I wanted to show the triangle development that's right near kind of 45th Fifth Street and Guadalupe, in between Guadalupe and Lamar there. So that was a very unusual scenario where you had a whole bunch of undeveloped land in the middle of the urban core. And so when that development went in, they put in a very large detention pond, and it works, and it's really helps our downstream conveyance situation in Hyde Park down right below it. So they had to put that in because they were greenfield. But then if you were right next door and had the same size project and already had 80, like you were saying, you would just be like, hey, I'm not increasing the peak, I'm done, you know, I'm good. So it's a big change, and we recognize that, and so that's why we're wanting to look at where are the impacts, who's, you know, people are going to ask about housing impacts, all these different things. But we would also like to make sure that if there is an opportunity when somebody's redeveloping to provide critical infrastructure that otherwise we can't provide, you know, how do we do that? And that's the idea on this. And we would love to have more detailed conversations with you guys about it.
One more. Yeah, just a couple. For the first part of the erosion hazard zone, have we already scheduled stakeholder meetings for November, December, or?
We not yet. And what I've done is just looked literally at a map and looked at the different communities that are out there that are already there. But we also wanted to get together. I'd like to reach out to I assume they're still around. Back when I did that for the 2008 project, we talked to the Texas Aggregate and Concrete Association. I'm sure they're going to be extremely interested in this ordinance. So we you know, there's various stakeholders we'll want to reach out to, whether they people that live there, environmental interest groups, and so forth. So yeah, we'll definitely. But we haven't set up our first meeting. In fact, later today, I'm working with our public information office, and we're talking about a strategy to roll that out and get the word out about it.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm with engineers about the erosion. So very important.
Oh, yeah. And so GABA and Metropolis, I mean, a bunch of people are going to be super interested. Podero actually was the one that kind of brought this forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing was for the landscape and redevelopment pieces. Are you approaching it differently for public infrastructure projects in the right way, or is it going to apply uniformly as many?
Let's see.
Above 8% for maybe not.
Right, it's exempted. Yeah. So during Code Next, we looked at that because we were talking about the greenfield thing, and we put into the text. We realized if you have a very linear roadway project, it's going to be really hard to meet that standard. And basically, there's so many other public goods going on there. We're like, no, we're not going to do that. So those are exempted. So if you did if you did big road reconstruction of South Lamar or what have you, it would not have to meet it. You want to say that? Yeah, say it again. They couldn't hear. But we would require the erosion hazard zone stuff for our own projects or anything else. And so we'll have key conversations with our Parks Department staff and so forth. You saw a lot of the land along the river there is in the parks. And, you know, I think they understand this. They don't want to have things caving into the, you know, you saw that bridge that got wiped out, the pedestrian bridge, that was their infrastructure. So they get it, we get it. But anyway, it's important to talk to all the stakeholders about it, including internal city stakeholders.
All right.
So I could talk on.
Yeah, Matt, you
Keep
did a
going.
great job
All right.
on the time constraints, so I appreciate it. If we could get a head count in the back. 70? All right,
Wow.
70 people.
Appreciate it. We've got a little gift here for you. If y'all could just give a round of applause to Matt.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Thank you. So next up, our next meeting is going to be November 21st. Feel free to scan this code. It'll open up a link for you to sign up for that and get some more information. Thanks all for coming out, and we'll see you next month.